We're going down.
I was in my massive garage, working on my expensive BMW, when suddenly, I heard a piece of news that would change my life forever. The world's largest plane, the Antonov 225, was being rebuilt after its tragic crash. And the craziest part? The factory team came straight to my door and asked me to join them, to help with the engines and the physics behind this flying giant. After months of intense work, the unbelievable day finally came. Uncle Ken, was going to be the first person to test fly the biggest plane ever built. But my excitement didn't last long. Just seconds after takeoff, alarms went off, smoke started pouring out, and the engines began failing one after another. All I could see in front of me was the endless ocean, right before the plane crashed straight into the water. And when I opened my eyes, I found myself stranded on a deserted island, in the middle of Hawaii. This isn't just a flight, this is survival. And this was only the beginning. It all started one quiet evening. Uncle Ken was in his giant garage, tightening bolts and polishing his expensive BMW. The echo of tools filled the air, metal against metal, a normal night, or so he thought. Suddenly, breaking news interrupted the silence. On the TV screen, Antonov AN 225, the largest aircraft in history, is being rebuilt. Ken froze as the announcer's voice echoed through the garage. His heart raced. This wasn't just a plane. This was the dream of every engineer on Earth. Before he could even process it, headlights appeared outside. A loud knock on the garage door shook the air. Standing there was a group of Antonov engineers in uniforms. They looked straight at Ken and said, "We need you. Engines, physics, endurance, this mission can't happen without your help." Uncle Ken was stunned. Him? Working on the biggest plane in the world? The engineers laid out massive blueprints on the hood of his BMW, schematics of engines the size of buses and wings longer than skyscrapers. It was insane, but deep inside, Ken felt the fire of adventure ignite. Days turned into nights as Ken worked with the team. He welded steel, tested engines, and solved problems no one else could. Sweat dripped, sparks flew, and the skeleton of a new Antonov 225 slowly rose from the factory floor. Finally, after months of relentless work, the masterpiece stood tall, a brand new Antonov AN 225, ready for its first test flight. But what no one knew was, this flight would change Uncle Ken's life forever. The massive Antonov aircraft took off smoothly from the runway, with all systems stable. Uncle Ken sat in the cockpit, breathing deeply as he watched the glowing control panels in front of him. He smiled slightly and said over the radio, "Here we go, to Hawaii." The plane began crossing thousands of kilometers over the Pacific Ocean. White clouds cleared the path ahead, and the sun reflected brightly on its enormous wings. Inside the cockpit, Uncle Ken felt proud of what had been achieved, a historic moment, the world's largest plane flying again. But suddenly, a strange sound came from the left engine. Alarm sirens blared everywhere. Warning! Engine number 2 has failed. Uncle Ken gripped the controls tightly, trying to stabilize the aircraft. But only moments later, more alarms erupted. Engine number 4 has failed. The plane started shaking violently, control devices rattled, and Uncle Ken shouted over the radio, "We have an emergency. The engines are collapsing one after another." Suddenly, all the control panels went dark. The giant aircraft had become nothing more than a floating piece of metal in the sky, with no power. Then, in a terrifying moment, the final alarm rang out, "Warning! Risk of explosion." At that moment, Uncle Ken had only one choice, survival. With lightning speed, he rushed to the emergency exit, forced it open against the raging wind, and jumped into the void. The parachute opened at the very last second, the fierce wind carrying him away from the aircraft. As he dangled in the sky at a tremendous height, he turned back to witness the horrifying scene. Collision. A massive explosion shook the horizon. The Antonov burst into a giant fireball, flames consuming it as it shattered in the sky above the ocean. The shock was unimaginable, but Uncle Ken was still alive. He drifted with his parachute above the endless sea, and far away in the distance, an island began to appear. Hawaii.